Today I have with me Justine, who is a classical Odissi dancer. And I myself have practiced classical Indian dance called bharatanatyam for decades. And the two of us are here uh, to talk about dance as a spiritual experience. I would let Justine introduce herself first and talk about her experience and relationship with dance. And then we'll delve into how, uh, dance has been a spiritual practice for each one of us. Over to you,
Thank
Justine.
you so much, Malini. I'm so happy to get to do this conversation with you. It's just really a privilege and an honor. And so I grew up in a very small place in rural Northern California, and I had always practiced dance, of not classical Indian dance, but Western styles of dance from age of 5. But I had this deep desire to understand the relationship between dance and ritual, dance and religion, because as a Westerner, I didn't grow up in a Christian household or anything, but I knew that for me, embodied experience was this great gateway to spirit, but I had no blueprint for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to school in Massachusetts to a small alternative college, and I knew that I wanted my course of study to be in dance and religion. But at that time, this was many years ago, that you couldn't Wikipedia things, you couldn't Google things. And so resources were like in books at the library, like trying to discover, historically, what is the relationship? Because I knew that throughout history, throughout the world, people had used dance as an integral part of spirituality. And in 1995, during my first year of university, I met my guru, Ranjana Devi,
Mm-hmm.
and she was a practitioner, a guru of Odissi dance from India. And here, suddenly, I discovered this intermarriage of a specifically religious, specifically imbued with mythology, imbued with religious iconography, and even in the movement itself seemed to hold a kernel of deep spirituality to me, of Vedic knowledge. And I had at that time, I really had very little relationship to Hinduism, to Eastern knowledge. But I began studying with my guru and studied with her almost every day. From 1995, I went through periods of living in her household, very traditionally. And then I traveled with her to India. I became a principal dancer in her company. And I took my whole course of study in undergraduate in the relationship between dance and religion, specifically focused on classical Indian dance.
Nice.
Yeah, and then it was actually my guru who I was in India, and I knew that I wanted to do a longer course of study in India. I had gone with her, done some studies, and actually did a little study of Chow dance. But I said to my guru, I want to go to India and study. I know this is something I want to do, but I didn't want to, we have the guru relationship. I didn't want to disturb that relationship. And so I said, what can I do? And so she suggested that I study Mohiniyattam.
Mm-hmm.
So then I was able to go to Kerala, and I did several years of study in Mohiniyattam and actually wrote my doctoral thesis on Mohiniyattam. But I feel academically connected to Mohiniyattam from Kerala, and it's very beautiful, and I perform some, but Odissi is like in my bones because I've been studying it for so long, and the relationship to my teacher is so sweet and so important. So that's where I really get that juice and that relationship for me. So that's kind of been my journey with dance through many, many years.
Very unique journey because not a lot of people automatically want to connect to what's the mythology or how do you use dance in ritual. And like, do you know the seed of that thought? Like, where did it come from? Because most people just dance for the heck of dancing, right? You hear some music, especially in this day and age, and if it is upbeat and has a lot of rhythm and your body wants to move, that's dance. So how, and you grew up in a very different era, and to come up with that thought of dance.
There was just this deep internal quest for me, this deep wanting to know, wanting to have spiritual experience, meditation experience. I don't know how we can put it into language, but to have the experience of the divine, and knowing that my gateway to that was through movement. And knowing that ballet, I could have some experience, or Western modern dance or jazz dance, like you can have those feelings, but it's not a pathway. It's not a gateway. It doesn't have mythology. It doesn't have, specifically religious lyrics. It's not that vehicle. So when I discovered Indian dance, it was like, oh, here is something. And not just because it was outside of my culture. Yeah. I think it's easy to read when Westerners study Indian dance, like it's just something exotic to them or something, or cute to dress up in the costume. And you can read it that way. One could read it. But for me, it really wasn't. It was like, here is finally the feet, are naked and on the earth, and we honor the earth. We do our bhumi pranam. Before we dance, we touch the earth. We bring that to our heart. We honor the teachers. We honor the deities. And while the dance is no longer in the temple or in that environment, still it's specifically sacred. And so that's very different than most Western dance traditions, right? And so that for me became so important.
Yeah. I started dancing in India. I was maybe 3.5, 4 years old. And honestly, I remember that growing up, I would not walk but dance. And like when I would walk with my mom to the grocery store, or she would get us back from daycare, we would walk back home, and I couldn't just not walk in a straight line. I would just be like dancing. But I always for me, I can't talk about dance without talking about my weight, because I was always a little chubby kid. So my parents put me in dance because they wanted me to have some exercise and lose weight. And for years it was about that. And I was dancing bharatanatyam, and I was I think a little above average student. But very close to puberty is when I think somehow my relationship with dance changed. And that happened when we started doing abhinaya. Abhinaya is really storytelling through emotions, and you have to infuse your heart in order to tell the story. And as soon as that element of heart came into picture, is my relationship with dance changed, and I started feeling more like myself. I started understanding that I like to dance and I like to be in that body, and it's not just like an exercise my parents are sending me to lose weight. Right. And the sweetness it was bringing in me. And I did dance bharatanatyam almost throughout my life, but I would do folk dances too, and I would do garba and dandiya, which is pretty big during Navratri in India. And I would participate in contests and just win them and love it. Like I could dance through the night. And there's a Maharashtrian folk dance called Lavani, and I would enjoy doing it and full of energy. And so discovering that sweetness within me and enjoying to dance happened when I understood there is an element of heart in it. And so I've continued to dance throughout my life, except in India I had to give it up when I was in 10th grade. You have to focus on studies. And then when I came to US, in India I used to learn with Srimati Revati Srinivas Raghavan, and I completely adore her because she was responsible for that switch in me. And then when I came here and I finished my master's, and when I started my PhD program in physiology, nothing to do with dance, is when I found a teacher here, Vijay Prakash in Los Angeles, and really like started on that journey and coming to dance from a very different place, coming to dance as an adult, coming to dance because I find meaning and purpose in it, and not because my parents are forcing me to go there. That was life-changing for me.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
And I find that, because I've studied dance from many places in the world. That was my course of study. And then my PhD was in anthropology with a focus on embodiment, on movement in cultures. And I find that in the specific movements of the classical styles, which have been recreated, and we can talk of the history of all of them, and I can only really speak to Odissi, to Mohiniyattam, though I've seen so much bharatanatyam and kuchipudi and all. There is something specific about the movement. The movement itself contains the fundamental aspects of the worldview, we could say. The way the feet are used, the way the weight is downward. We get into the element, the cardinal Mahabhuta of earth.
Yes.
The way the ribcage, especially in Odissi, and I think even in early precursors of Bharatanatyam, the torso was moved more. Now, you know, it's held rigid. I suspect, you know, we get into the water element, and we, you know, we get the air element in the upper centers, and we get into the ether. And I think the body becomes like a temple of the elements, you know? And so that's specifically in the movement, you know, without even talking about the costuming, without even talking about the mudras, without even, you know, it's in the movement itself. And in our practice, the practice of dance, as you know, becomes a sadhana. It becomes a spiritual practice.
Yes.
Yeah, we can achieve, we can learn a piece, we can perform, but it's actually the practice itself that becomes the practice of, like someone doing the Surya Namaskar, or somebody doing prayer every day, or someone doing meditation. And that's what's so attractive to me, I think.
Yeah. So how do you use dance as a spiritual practice?
So at this point, my dance is less because I'm far from my guru, and a few reasons. I only perform a couple times a year, but I'm constantly revisiting the fundamentals of my dance practice, because I have a yoga sadhana and a meditation sadhana, but I'll revisit my advus, I'll revisit all my mudras, just small kernels, and then I'll take a piece and I'll work it over as part of a spiritual practice, so I still have it in the repertoire, and then I can offer it to an audience when I'd like to. But my focus right now isn't really in performing. It's like, it's there, I can do it, but it's almost less interesting to me.
Yeah. I totally see that, because after a point, that whole performance aspect just drops away, right? For me, I have performed a lot in LA, played characters and things like that, and characters that just do not, you know, resonate with my current being. And how do you get into those
That's
characters?
so interesting when that happens. You have to like play a bull demon, and you're like, or something, you know?
Yeah. And so, and I'm conscious when I perform on stage, because I don't look like everybody else. I look different. And moments before I get on the stage, it's like, I just don't want to be in the body, because it just feels so restrictive. And that switch happens for me, that's the spiritual practice. When I get on the stage, that switch happens where the body drops away, because I'm very aware of the flaws of my body. And there is just a connection to the divine. For me, dance is Shiva. So it just feels like he dances and I'm just the vehicle.
There's this beautiful state that happens when I perform a piece that I've, you know, worked so many times, that suddenly you're in a witness state and the movement is happening and you're part of it, but you're also in this meditation of witnessing the self in the tala, in the raga, in the music structure as it unfolds around you.
Yes, there's a witness state, and there is a state of, did that just happen? Like,
precisely.
Did I do that? What just happened, right? It's very hard to explain, because you're like, you feel like you go into a trance, you dance, when you come out of it and you're in the wings, you're like, who was that? And I think that's when you learn to just completely surrender your body, because surrender is a big aspect of spirituality, and let all the divine forces take over.
Yeah.
And you're not just the only one creating that energy, right? You have Bharatanatyam is done with live musicians on the stage. And you have your teacher playing the Natwangam, and everybody's energy comes and converges, and that energy of the audience converges with you on that stage at that point where they are locked, everybody's locked into that energy, and it just flows.
Exactly.
And you're just being the vehicle. And then when you come out of it, you're like, what just happened?
Yeah.
And so I have started to, the more I have grown into yoga and meditation, I've realized the Shiva and Shakti aspect, right? And the object and the observer, the masculine and the feminine. And when we meditate, like traditionally that has been taught in the Western world, and including in India, the Eastern world, is when you sit still in a place, you close your eyes, you go within, and you become the observer. That's becoming Shiva. That's becoming really still. That's actually stepping into the masculine, because Shiva is the ultimate masculine. He is the observer. What are you observing, right? And that's dance, Shakti, the movement.
Correct.
So when you're in movement, when you're dancing, it is a meditative space, because you're embodying Shakti. You're letting Shakti move through you. So you become, you can be the observer when you are in a very still state, but you become the object or the one that is being observed when you are in that space. And it took me a while to understand that's what is happening, and how it is okay to be in movement and experience that. A person who's in the moment can only experience that deep sweetness of what is developed within you. And classical Indian forms, like you said, are designed very specifically to take you to that state, because everything is about
I think so.
Elevation. And I mean, you can reach that state if you're extremely present in your movement.
In anything. Absolutely. Absolutely. But I think that because it comes out of a religious culture, it has those building blocks already in it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. I would, so Natya Shastra, right? Dance has been attributed that it has come down from Natya Shastra, and then there are some so-called gharanas, some families and that have carried the tradition, and they have,
shaped and so on.
Shaped it, and the way we practice it. Yes, Bharatanatyam, mostly people practice it in a very linear form, because it was associated with the Devdasis, and then just to strip away all of that connotation, it is very linear. But Padma Subramanian, also incorporates the really feminine, curvaceous aspect, and it is a very beautiful technique that is being used. But it is really a technique of surrendering the body in the flow, in the moment. And it takes a while to understand that. Like, it takes you
years and years
of practicing, and suddenly the same vidit you're doing, the same adavu you're doing clicks in such a different way.
That's right.
That it creates that pure joy within you. I also have, like, during my Arangetram, which is
traditional first performance,
traditional solo. I was asked to do a piece on Krishna. My Varnam, which is the longest piece, was on Krishna, and till then I didn't have any relationship with Krishna. But I'm portraying this an hour-long dance on him, And with some resistance, when I started practicing and understanding the stories, I could feel Krishna in every single thing.
Mm,
And that's the beauty of it. Like, it makes you really understand the essence of not only the mythological stories, but the deities you're portraying and you're depicting. And it's
absolutely. And for me, coming from completely outside of the tradition, coming completely from outside of the culture, but just studying dance, then suddenly when I went to India, I had a fluency, not with all aspects, but with so many aspects of the culture, simply because I had studied dance for so long. It was like already there. These things that I didn't, it was interesting because I lived in India with my husband, who was not, interested in particular. He was working in India. And I remember we were at a long performance of Mohiniyattam, and I'm just like riveted because it's a story from Ramayana. And I can tell because I'm like, oh, it's that. And I know the story and I know the mudras. And he's like, oh, when's it going to be over? Because to him, it's just the same movement over and over. Mohiniyattam is very slow and very gentle. All
Mhm.
the costume is white and gold, so there's no variation. So if you don't know the context, you're completely lost,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that it helps to know the language in which
Yes,
the story is being said.
definitely.
And then as an audience, because audience is called rasikas, they're called
That's right.
rasikas, right? And there's a Sanskrit verse which is yato hastas tato drishti, yato drishti tato manaha,
Mm-hmm.
yato manahas tato bhavo,
Oh,
yato bhava tato rasaha, which really means uh, yato hastas tato drishti, where your hand goes, your eyes follow.
follow. Yeah.
Where your eyes follow, yato drishti, tato manaha, where
The
your
mind follows.
mind follows.
Mm-hmm.
So the mind should follow your
Mm-hmm.
eyes.
Yeah.
Um, Yato manahas tato bhavo. When your mind follows, your heart follows and
The
develops.
emotion, the bhavam, the
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
develops the. There's not a English
It's
word for
not, yeah, I know it's impossible really to translate. It's
yeah,
like this emotional resonance or something might be what we could call it. It's
yeah.
like, mm,
And then when you generate that bhava,
yeah,
that's when the rasa, the juice, the
the juice. Mm,
real rasa of the whole experience comes up. That rasa is where the audience is connecting.
exactly right.
And so it's the the audience is an active participant in the
Exactly.
whole
And you
process.
know what? Because all dancers, we learn this shlokam and we know it. And I've really thought about physiologically.
Mm-hmm.
When we move our eyes in particular patterns, it connects to the endocrine system.
Yes.
It creates a specific hormonal flow in the body.
Yes.
Just from and this is not like woo woo, it's like actually does by moving the eyes, moving the tongue, moving the face. So we have an actual physiological response, a hormonal response that causes us to feel in a certain way. And when we, as a performer, you can imagine in an intimate space, starts to have a hormonal flow in a particular way, what happens to everyone watching? They have the same thing. So we actually become in this space together where we are changing like our neural pathways, we're changing the way we think, and we're changing the way our physiology is like. And so this beautiful thing does really blossom, not just as a metaphor. I've been thinking about that a lot lately.
Yeah, yeah. That's something beautiful you said. The audience and the performer becomes one.
Exactly.
The observer
Yeah,
and the object that is
yeah,
being observed become
yeah.
one in that when that rasa is developed.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
And I think it happens like psychologically, emotionally, but I think it also happens physiologically
Yes.
in our bodies,
Yes.
that we're like actually coming into some resonant harmony together, like into a field together for whatever reason, but into a meditational field together so that we feel one in this kind of spiritual space. Yeah, it's very beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Because even as a Rasika, as an audience member, when I've
Mm.
watched performances that have touched me,
Mm,
I remember them for life. I
that's
remember
right.
the lighting, I remember
Yeah.
the costume, I remember
Yeah.
how I felt, I
Mm.
remember who the musicians were on stage. That whole experience gets captured, and every time it comes back, that memory comes back, it creates that joy within me.
It creates exactly, and so and that's a hormonal state. It's like the juices, you know, that your endocrine system, the connection to soma, the connection to the moon, like it's there in the body, in the glands, in the chakras. And we can also, you know, in the costume for classical dance, we can easily see the chakra system. We can
Yes.
see like so many things in the dance. It's like a hologram or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This has been great, Justine. Do you
Yes.
have any last closing thoughts about dance
Mm.
as a spiritual practice?
I think the something that we haven't talked about as much is, you know, the real hard work that goes in, the real labor that goes in to the dance practice. And, you know, my teacher has always said, you know, it's not just about putting on a pretty costume and looking cute, you know, it's like about that hard, long work of really like earning in some way the right to put on your ankle bells and to put on your costume to be able to perform. And that's something that I don't take lightly at all, you know, because it is in that dedicated practice, that sadhana of dance, that we become dancers, you know, and it is labor work. It is spiritual labor that we are doing like that. So that
Yeah, yeah. It takes like
help us.
just put your hand up in that perfect angle. Takes years just to get it. The
Yeah,
muscles,
years of sweat and hard work. Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
it takes you're absolutely right. There is no dance without practice, without your sadhana.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
The last thing I would like to touch upon is the devotion,
Mm.
because classical Indian dances are the place where you first get introduced to devotion. And of course, you know, we have gurus coming to America, and a lot of Westerners are full of devotion to
Mm.
these spiritually embodied beings that they come. And even in India, they teach devotion at a really early stage, but to embody it and experience it, you need an art form, whether it's music or dance or some other art form, but that elevating all the emotions to the level of devotion, just the love for no reason, like just
Mhm.
being in love. We don't need any
Mm.
reason to be in love. I think that devotion aspect is what keeps bringing me back to
Mm.
dance. That's where I practice devotion.
And that's so beautiful. And you know that bhakti path that we find in music and we find in poetry, well, dance has all of the aspects and the alankara, the ornamentation.
Yes.
Um, all of it is there. So dance becomes, in this tradition, it becomes such a pinnacle of that
Mhm.
devotion and that beauty in devotion. Yeah.
Yeah. This has been wonderful, Justine.
I
Thank
know,
you
it's
so
so
much.
nice to talk to you.
Yes, this has been great. Thank you. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. Thank you for inviting me. I can't wait till we do another one. I hope that people find these interesting and useful.